thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. So give me just 1 second while I get that set up. We got our slides. All right. I hope, can everybody see that? See the screen, the slides? Should be a big, bright red screen. I hope so. Yeah, we got a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So before we really get started, I will say, as far as questions go, we are going to pause a few times throughout the session to answer questions. So if you have them, please put them in the chat box, and then either Gilberto or Claudia will read them to us when it's time, because I can't multitask anymore.
Megan,
Yes.
I just realized I have the wrong notes for our class. Like I just
Okay.
looked down to read them. So talk amongst yourselves. I will be back in 2 seconds.
All right. Well, so I guess, let's see, let me open up my chat again here. I am actually curious. Actually, can I open up my chat? I always lose my mouse in Zoom. So there it is. All right, I got my chat opened again. So I'm actually curious. For those of you who've had the time to take the author personality quiz already, if you don't mind, real quick, in the chat box, just type in which personality you came out as on the quiz. Just gives us a sense of kind of what the audience, who we're talking to for the most part, I guess, as far as those personalities, and then we can go into greater detail when the time comes.
Okay, I am back. I'm so sorry about that.
No worries. I just asked everyone to put in their personality type if they already had a chance to take the quiz. And so Lisa came back as an artist. So we have one artist at least. That's awesome. We'll just say up front, and we'll probably repeat ourselves several times, but Greta and I are actually both started out as dabblers and are now about 50-50 artists and entrepreneurs. So the whole quiz is not intended to, identify you definitively forever, but just kind of give you a starting point. So.
Right.
All right. So let's see if I can close my chat. Can I close that now? Uh-oh, I may have to figure this out. Sorry, hold on. There we go. Perfect. Okay.
So I don't know if Megan said this while I was running off getting my notes, but you're going to find as we go through this, we're going to be talking about the tips on publishing for the 5 different personality types. And you're going to see that we really believe there is no single right way for people to produce or publish or promote their books, because we're all individuals. And that's kind of the point of all this. And I'm sure, like she said, we'll be repeating on that. We will be repeating that, but that's sort of the point of this workshop.
All right. So today, what we're going to cover is how and why we came up with the author personalities. We're going to give an overview of the 3 basic paths to publication as we've identified them. So this is sort of our top 3 basic paths that most authors follow on their journey to publication. Then we're going to give a detailed explanation of each personality, and we'll go into what that means, what that personality type entails, and then how that affects your attitudes toward writing, publishing, promoting, and honestly, even your marketing your work down the road. And then last, we're going to give you a toolbox for each of the personalities, just resources that will help you get started on your journey to publication. But before we get into those details, who are we anyway, and why should you listen to us?
So I'm Greta Boris, and I am traditionally published. I'm also a USA Today best-selling author, and my current series that's on the market is The 7 Deadly Sins, and they're standalone novels of psychological suspense that have been called atmospheric and unputdownable.
And I'm Megan Haskell. I'm the independent author half of our duo, and I am the award-winning author of both the Senyari Chronicles, which is a fantasy adventure series, and the War of the Nine Fairy Realms epic fantasy series. And I write stories of myth, magic, and mayhem. But together, we founded the Author Wheel. With more than 20 years, actually quite a bit more than 20 years now, I think, of combined writing and publishing experience, we've really made a lot of mistakes. The benefit is that you will hopefully get to learn from those mistakes and not make the same ones we have. So we're really excited to have you in our course. And so I think we'll just go ahead and dive in.
So why is your author personality important? Well, if you don't know where you're at, it's really hard to know how to get where you want to go. So that's where the author personality quiz comes in. So if you haven't taken it yet, don't do it now. Wait till the end. But it's always available for free on our website, and we will have there's a link in the chat, but we'll have a link at the end of the presentation. So how and why did we come up with this very scientific quiz? Well, Megan and I have been teaching about different paths to publication at conferences and writers groups and for the public library for a long time. And we were kind of, the yin and the yang, because Megan is independent publishing, or self-publishing as some people call it. And then I am traditional publishing with a publishing house, So we would try to present both. And as we were doing it, we realized that a lot of new writers, and even some experienced ones, had not ever taken the time to examine their present position or their motivations or even their vision when it came to their writing life. And in fact, we realized we hadn't really fully examined all those things for ourselves. And we really began to believe that this lack of self-knowledge puts people at a great disadvantage, because we had met people, for instance, who had written very personal memoirs about their journey out of the pain of a bad divorce or maybe the death of a child. And then really their whole goal for that book was that they wanted to use it to maybe give it to people and to be a speaker, that they can help people with this thing that they'd gone through. And then, but they were planning to pitch these hard-boiled, hard-nosed New York agents. And we would hopefully wanted to save them from that. But it was hard for us to explain why. And it was also hard for us to stop in a group when you've got 50 people and examine what each person was doing.
Meanwhile, I know a lot of really fast-paced genre writers who can put out a book like every couple months. It's amazing. Like in some cases every 4 to 6 weeks they will write and publish a new book. And so they chose to independently publish, which is probably the right path for them because it's a faster path to publication. But they weren't doing anything to market those books. And they didn't know why they weren't achieving their goal of becoming that full-time or having that full-time income as just off of their fiction. Meanwhile, other authors would take 5 years to write their book, and they dreamed of, major book awards and accolades and getting into bookstores and that, the airport bookstore, for example. But they'd heard that the independent path to publication or self-publishing was the best way to go to get your book out there, that traditional publication was dying. But they didn't realize that those goals didn't meet up with that path to publication. They just weren't aligned. So we were presenting this generic material about the publishing industry. And the only way we could really guide these people, because they all had different goals and different needs and different desires, was on that individual level. And that does not work when you're in a room with 50 people and you only have 10 minutes for Q&A. So we got to thinking that if we could come up with a way for people to evaluate themselves, it would really be a lot easier to help steer them toward that material that would help them the most. And that's really how the quiz came about. Now, we are still perfecting it. It's as Greta said, very scientific. We came up with the questions ourselves. And at first it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek fun little game that we would use to start our classes, but it became more serious as we realized how useful it really could be. So if you have feedback for us, please do not hesitate to email us at info@authorwheel.com. We'd love to hear from our students and our readers and find out what's working and what's not. So please share that with us.
So I think we're supposed to switch slides, aren't we? Or not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry. I'll keep talking then. I was waiting for the slide. I'm sorry. This is what happens when there's two of us. It's like a little bit the Lucy and Ethel show. So, just giggle along, guys. So anyway, what we decided to do was break down the various kinds of writers into 5 categories. And we made them alphabetical because then we could remember them. So we have an artist, a bucket lister, a calling card writer, a dabbler, and an entrepreneur. And as with any personality quiz, you may fall into more than one type, or like both of us, you could be almost a perfect divide between 2 of them. We're both a divide between the entrepreneur and the artist. You could also be a dabbler now, but really wish you were an entrepreneur. So it's not meant to pigeonhole you at all, but to give you a starting point. Also, if you have been writing and publishing for a while, you may find that your author personality actually changes over time. And so for you, this workshop could be a little refresher or a reset. So as I said, the quiz was initially created with publishing in mind, although we do believe, and we will be expanding on this with in other courses and in other books that we write, that it is much more than just publishing. It's the way you approach your writing and your marketing, as Megan said. But for this course in particular, we're really going to focus on the publishing side of the world. And so in order to do that, we're going to take a moment to talk about the 3 basic paths to publication, so that you'll better understand the suggestions that we make for each personality. And I know this may be a review for many of you, but bear with us because we want to make sure you understand what we mean when we say small press publishing or independent publishing or so on. So now we have the new slide. So there are 3 basic pathways to publication. It's agented, traditional, small press, traditional, and independent self-publishing. Now, there's a lot of different ways to slice the publishing industry, but we've chosen what we believe are the 3 most common ways. And so just running through them quickly, agented traditional is exactly what it sounds like. Your job is to pitch your work to literary agents. Then you get one of them to represent you. And then their job is to sell your book to a publisher. Now, the advantage to this path is that the agent obviously has contacts that you don't have and can get your story in front of editors who will not look at an author's manuscript unless that author is coming through an agent or one of their writers or some other thing. So the agent also probably knows a lot more about contracts than you do and might be able to strike a better deal. Now, the downside of seeking an agent is time and difficulty. Agents are very selective about the authors they choose to represent, so it can take years and years to get signed. And of course, if you do find an agent, then that agent has to find a publisher, which can also take a very long time. And then on the financial side of the world, any royalties or advances that you get from that publishing house, you do have to share with your agent. So the good of you who don't want to wait so long, I used to say until you're 85, but I feel like that's sort of negative because I don't want to be negative. Some people get agents a lot faster than others. So, but if you don't want to wait, is that some smaller presses will accept unagented manuscripts. And in fact, my publisher, when I got my contract with them, I didn't have an agent. I went directly to them because they were new, and I've gotten to grow with them. And now you can't approach them without an agent or meeting them at a conference. So when the presses are newer, sometimes you can actually pitch your work to them directly. Now, the downside of working with a small press is that they do not have the reach or the clout of the big publishing houses, and it is much more difficult to get your books into libraries or bookstores, and their marketing budgets are generally much smaller. So often you do not make as much money with them as you will make with a bigger publishing house.
So the third and final path to publication that we've identified is the independent or self-publishing journey. And that's really where you, as the author, have a dual role as both the creative talent and the business executive. So you are your own publisher. Now, I prefer independent publishing as the term instead of self-publishing, because really, as an indie author, you should not be doing everything by yourself. In fact, I hire a number of people, from cover designers to editors, and I get help from beta readers and early readers as well. So I'm not doing everything myself. But what I am doing is making all the decisions relating to the production and marketing of my book. Everything is under my purview, and that's why it's independent or self-publishing. So obviously, this means that indie publishing takes an investment in both time and money. Now, how much time and how much money is up to you. So some of our bucket listers who only have one book, maybe a memoir or something like that, that's really they want to get published solely for posterity rather than sales revenue, they're not going to want to spend a lot, but they still will need some small upfront capital and a few hours that they can spend learning how to upload the files for publication and get the books up online. However, the benefits of independent publishing are the speed that you can get your book to market. As I mentioned before, if you're writing a book a month, then there is no way even a small press can keep up with that schedule. The only way you can do that is indie, because you can just get them up quickly. You hire a single cover designer to do lots of covers, and you get them up, bam, 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 bam. So speed is a huge benefit of the indie path. You also earn higher royalties for each book sold. So you're not sharing your revenue with your publisher or your agent. You're getting the entire royalty from the distributor like Amazon or the bookstores. So that means that you're going to earn a lot more per book, but it's a lot harder to sell higher volumes. So it's a trade-off, and it's a numbers game. You can for sure make a full-time income as an indie author. I have lots of friends who do it, but you're probably not going to make $1 million. And when you first start out, you're probably only going to make sell a few copies as you get started. So just kind of keep that in mind. It takes a while to ramp up, but it has the possibility to do very well financially if that's your goal. Now, I do like to take a pause here and just note that there are a lot of predatory companies out there that will call themselves, indie publishers, or they will say that they're author services, or that they're going to, get your book out and make you an Amazon bestseller overnight. And they're going to happily charge you thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars to publish your manuscript for you. But these are often called vanity presses because while they make all these promises, a lot of times they don't put a whole lot of effort into the actual publication or marketing of your book. So you have to be really, really careful about who you choose to work with and do your research. There's a great website called writerbeware.com that has a list of these vanity presses, and the good ones and the bad ones, and the author services that are legitimate, that are charging you on an hourly rate, or the offering, a la carte services kinds of things. And there are some really good ones out there. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying be careful if you choose to hire one of these companies to manage your book for you. Okay, so we've gotten that out of the way. It's time to get into the actual personalities.
Before we do start on that, does anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far? We figured we could we could take a couple of questions on the publishing side, on the different paths to publication. If everybody's cool on that, then we'll get going.
I have a question. Are you going to be sharing the PowerPoint presentation with the attendees for future reference?
Um,
Well, I think
That-
there's going to be a recording of this, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure, Gilberto or Claudia, if you can.
Yes, for everyone who's registered, this recording will be available for 30 days. So in 24 hours, it'll be uploaded to the CVANT website and you'll be able to access that.
That sounds great. But
And
Yes.
and
I had a question.
sorry, let me just add to that.
Sure.
All of this information, or a lot of it, is also available on our website. So that would be the second place you could go. We actually do have each of the personality types listed out along with their toolbox, their list of resources, and we have some blog posts and things that we think might be helpful. So if you haven't already, do check out our website and kind of explore on there. You'll find a lot of information.
what's the name of the website?
Authorwheel.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sure. Okay.
Was
I
there?
had
Was there?
another- Yes, there was another question.
Oh, sure.
Regarding the marketing, I don't know if that's where you're gonna go next. I'm still a little, the difference between small press and independent press. Are the small presses like a chapbook presses? Or
No.
like, no.
No. So
What is the difference?
Okay, I'll explain that. Well, I shouldn't say no. Chapbook press could be also considered a small press, but a smaller press is it's a numbers thing. Like they publish less than, I think it's less than 50 novels a year, something like that is considered a smaller press. So it's basically how many novels they publish in a year. So but they will produce a book exactly the same way that like Random House will produce the book. They have editors, they have cover designers, the good ones will do it in print and digital and even some audio. One of mine is in audio. So they're exactly the same as the bigger presses. They're just a small, it's like saying a small company versus a large company, or a mom and pop shop versus, like you have the little local hardware store versus you have, Home Depot. It's that kind of difference. They do the same thing. It's just on a smaller scale. So that's
okay,
the
so
difference.
The traditional is like the Home Depot, the small press is like the A's, and the independent is the mom and pop or your own store.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. That's a good way.
Okay.
That's a good way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually, I think, write that down, Greta, would you?
Okay, so write that down. So we have Home Depot, A's, and Ma and Pa.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect. All right.
Okay.
All right. So is that all the questions for right now on the 3 basic paths to publication?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll still be
Okay.
talking about them. So.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so let's dig in. Okay, so we've got our first personality, and we are going to go through these alphabetically. It is not any kind of, order of preference or anything like that, order of priority, but just alphabetic, because sometimes we like to be clever or think we're clever. All right, so the artist. So for the artist, it's really all about the craft of writing. I mean, obviously, I think if you're publishing professionally, you probably want to make money selling your books, right? That's kind of everybody's goal, right? You want that advance, or you want to earn some cash for your hard work. But really, an artist is focused on beautiful prose and long-lasting stories that are going to resonate with readers, and they want to be recognized for that hard work and creativity with big awards, and they want to get their book into major bookstores and libraries, and they just they want that, they think they want that traditional that art, right? And a lot of artists are very wary of the business side of publishing. They may not feel that it's their job to be involved in the business end of things, or that marketing is completely outside of their skill set. They're writers first and foremost, not business people. So if the quiz says you're an artist, that probably means that you are really focused on the words. You're really focused on the story. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're an amazing writer right this second. It doesn't mean that you're going to go and take your book to, Tor or Random House or one of those big guys, and they're going to snap it up immediately. What it means is that that's your goal. That's what you're working toward. And so it's your dream to craft wonderful stories that really resonate, and like I said, that really have that long-lasting artistic appeal, more so than it is to make a quick buck. So because of this, we tend to recommend that artists choose that traditional publishing route. Publishers often offer opportunities to work with really high caliber editors and production teams. And because it's so difficult to get a publishing contract, you'll actually have to spend that time working toward that goal of perfecting your writing skills up front. A lot of newer writers will learn a lot from this process. Writers who've been writing for years and years will still learn a lot from this process too. It always helps to have good critique. But newer writers in particular, having that external validation will really let you know that your writing is of a high enough quality to meet your goals. Plus, if accolades like the New York Times bestsellers lists or prestigious book awards like the Hugo or Nebula, if those are your goals, then traditional publishing is often the only way to get them. If you go indie, you're going to be excluded from a lot of those lists and a lot of those awards. Now, that being said, there is a contingent of artists who want to pursue projects that are not as easy to sell. They're not neatly lined up with the current genre trends that the publishing houses are looking for. And if that's the case, and you have a niche project that you've created out of your heart, out of your soul, that's really just achieves that artistic goal, then you actually may want to consider independently publishing if you're hearing that those from agents and editors that book is really good, but they don't know how to market it. They don't know how to sell it. Then sometimes the only way to actually get it out there is through that independent publishing path. Of course, also be aware that if the publishing houses don't think it's going to sell, they might be right. So just be prepared for, those really niche, really unique stories that are hard to classify. They might be hard to find an audience for. So now, other considerations. Some artists actually also do consider publishing and marketing as an art in and of itself. So if you're also interested in the business side of publishing, and you might lean more actually toward the entrepreneurial side of the spectrum. So if that's the case, and you've been proclaimed an artist, but you still want to be a business person, you want to study the art of storytelling. It's something that's going to just feed your soul and really bring you joy. So taking classes and attending writers' conferences should definitely be high priorities. But you might also want to consider exploring that independent publishing path. It really depends on your mindset and how long you're willing to wait to see your book in print. Because again, it's a lot faster to get that book out there if you go indie versus if you go the traditional route. So for example, when I took the test, I came out about 50-50 artist and entrepreneur. In fact, I think if I changed like 2 questions, which were both still true for me, then it switched from one to the other. But for me, I actually never even considered a traditional contract because I have always wanted to run my own business. I looked forward to learning the ins and outs of publishing as much as I wanted to create powerful stories that would resonate with readers. So while I'm of the artist personality, I actually chose to follow the entrepreneur path. Now, last kind of word here is that there actually are opportunities to pursue both paths. A lot of my independent author friends are pursuing traditional publication because they want to reach a new market. They want to reach a new audience. Or sometimes they want to they want a publisher for a specific medium, like audiobooks. So you can always kind of pick and choose in the modern publishing world. If you have a project that you think will do really well through the traditional route, you can do that. And if you have another project that really needs to go indie because it's very niche, or you just think it'll go gangbusters and you've hit this market spot on and you want to just make it that money aspect of things, then you can go indie, and you can always trade back and forth. And I will say that honestly, if the right opportunity came my way, I would consider it. So for the artist, our recommendations are to really focus on studying craft and story structure, understand the art, and really pursue the joy of writing. You also want to attend conferences and join writers' organizations so that you can start to network and find your tribe, find those people that share that same passion. Some artists may want to consider writing and publishing shorter works because that will help build your portfolio. There's a website called Duotrope, and I think we can put the link in at the end, but it's Duotrope. Shares, or publishers can post on there what they're looking for submissions and what's open to submissions. And so you can find some great literary magazines or anthologies, things where shorter works might be able to get published more easily than a full-length novel. And then once you have those shorter works published, you put that on your query letter for agents or editors to say, look, I've already been proven that I can write. I already have proven that I have the skills to be published. And then when it comes to the marketing side of things, even artists who go the traditional route will need to start building their author platform. And what that means is you start to create a professional website. It can just be a simple page with, your author bio and a little bit about what you're working on. You might consider starting an email list where you collect, readers' emails who are interested in your work, and you start building that audience early. And then 1 or 2 social media platforms where your target readers like to hang out, and also where you enjoy being, because that's how you're going to attract people to your work early on before you actually get that deal. And that's important also to show agents and editors that you're serious about your writing and that you're trying to take it professionally. You're treating it professionally and as a career.
So the bucket lister, and I think I saw in the chat that somebody said that they or maybe they said they got the Dabbler. Anyway, hopefully there's a few bucket listers out there. So a bucket lister is a person who really has a book burning a hole in their computer. It could be a personal memoir. It could be a unique how-to for a small niche market. Maybe something they did in their career. I have a friend who just published a bucket lister book that he had been a coach, a baseball coach for many, many years. And he just wanted to write a book about how to teach kids how to bunt or something like that. I don't understand baseball, but that was something he really wanted to do. So the bucket listers, often they really don't have a strong desire to write or to be writers. It's the message of that one book that is motivating them, not the idea of having a career in writing. So generally speaking, these kind of books don't attract the attention of a traditional publisher, and they may be better suited for independent publishing. It is possible if your book has got some very unique things, a unique message, and there's a small niche publisher that covers that kind of thing, you might be able to reach out to one of those smaller publishers. Or if you're famous, you can always, or your mother's famous or your father's famous, you can always get but then big publishers will look at you. But for the vast majority of us, they're just not going to happen. So, because what publishers are often looking for is really fantastic writing or a really big, you already come with a big audience. Like you have a mailing list of 100,000 people that follow you already. That's what they want. And if you are not that interested in writing, so you're not, excellent, and you don't have a huge mailing list, that's your best bet is probably independent publishing. Now, other considerations for the bucket lister is to count the cost, because if you are going to independently publish, it is going to take time and it is going to take money, just as Megan said in the earlier part of this workshop. You can't just put your book up on Amazon. I've heard that phrase a lot, and it's a phrase that gets under my skin, because if people do that, it's really obvious and it's really embarrassing. So that is not something that you want to do, because even if you are not intending to make a lot of money with this book, it still represents you, and you want it to look like a professional product. And that means, unless you have a family member who's an editor or a graphic designer, you're probably going to have to pay at least something to have somebody edit your book and to have a nice cover created. The other thing you're going to have to think about is that if you do get your book, put your book up yourself on Amazon or one of the other online sites, that they're going to ask for things like your social security number, your physical address, and those kinds of things. I've also had people call me appalled that Amazon wanted that information. It's like, well, yeah, because somebody might buy it. And if they buy it, there's taxes to be considered. Amazon has to pay you. So it is a business. So even just one book is still a business. So just be cognizant of that. Now, the other thing to think about is that sometimes when people write that one book, they get really inspired and they decide they love this whole thing. They love the process. They've learned about indie publishing, and they got an idea for 3 more books that they want to write on their topic. And so that's great for them. It really makes sense to spend some time and energy learning about independent publishing, because they're going to have to replicate this process again and again. But for others, that kind of thing is a little overwhelming. And they just want their one book up there. So for them, their best bet may be to hire a reputable book coach or find some kind of hybrid publishing company. Hybrid publishing companies are companies where you pay them to help you get your book out on the market. But here's the thing. This is where you really have to do your research and go to that Writers Beware website, ask around, start Googling it, because there are so many predatory companies out there that you are their target market. They want to convince you that if you just give them a measly $10,000, $15,000, you're going to have this fantastic looking book, and they're going to make you an Amazon bestseller or whatever, and they won't. They'll take your money, of course. And then they're going to, I've seen some of these books, and the editing is just not good. It's just bad. It's very disappointing. The covers are very disappointing. And you could really do what they did. You could get that done much, much, much less expensively and much more professionally. So you're just going to have to spend a little bit of time doing your research. So the Bucket Listers Toolbox. What we recommend is that you set a publishing budget. Say to yourself, I can spend $300 on this book or $500 on this book. And make it, a realistic publishing budget. If you really think you can sell this book and make money on it, maybe your budget's a little bit bigger. Learn about independent publishing. That's another option. Another thing to do is research those reputable book coaches and the hybrid publishers, like we mentioned, and then visit that Writers Beware website. Those are the really key important things for you.
All right, so I think we're going to pause here for another quick Q&A if anyone has any questions on the artist or the bucket lister.
I had a question for the website and the social media.
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of things should be posted? Because I know, like, if you post something, it's considered already published. And for the website to just leave it there, like, what should you be changing on there to keep people that visit more than once see something new?
So it really depends on your goals. So if you are pursuing a traditional publishing contract, you probably don't want to publish your work in progress, right? You don't want to be doing, like I call it, serializing your novel, posting chapter by chapter. You definitely don't want to be doing that on other sites like, gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of it now. I can't. Scribed, right? So Scribed is a site where you can post chapter by chapter if you want to, and serialize something and make a little money on it. But if you do that, the traditional publishers probably aren't going to want that book. Now, you might be able to say, hey, look, this is my writing style. I've got a new idea, and that could work. But as far as your own website, if you're trying to go traditional, we generally recommend keep it simple. If you want to have, a landing page with what your work in progress is, just your title and a little blurb about it, something like that, maybe an author bio. And if you want to blog, you can blog on topics like your research or, maybe little small, excerpts, like a paragraph or just your favorite lines that you wrote this week, things like that, just to kind of keep it fresh. But really, when you're first starting out your first book, the point is just to prove that you have a presence. It's not necessarily, for traditionally published authors, it's not necessarily to start amassing a huge audience yet or anything like that. Now, if you're going indie, in addition to that, you can consider serializing or publishing chapter by chapter. That's a great tool that some authors have done with great success. The classic example is Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, right? I'm saying I'm getting the right author. I think that, yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So that was his method. And what he did was he blogged his research and what he was doing to, make sure that the book was as accurate and factual as possible. And then he started publishing chapter by chapter the story as he went along. And then ultimately he had enough fans that they wanted a compiled version of the book. And so he published that on Amazon for like 99 cents or something super cheap, because he didn't really care at the time about making a ton of money with it. But then that took off and did super, super well. And so then, I can't remember who it was, Penguin, I think, came to him and said, or an agent came to him and said, I think I can sell you to Penguin. Penguin picked it up. They made the movie, yada, 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 millionaire out the door, right? That is like the strike of lightning, outlier. That is not a common approach, but you can use that technique to start to build that audience and start to really try to find your readers before you ever publish, so that when you do launch, if you're going indie, when you do launch, you have a bit of a built-in audience. So it kind of depends on your goals, but again, really you need, kind of a landing page, an author bio, maybe a blog, and that'll get you started.
And if you do, especially if you're going traditional, if you do try to publish short stories with anthologies and those kinds of things, keep people up to date on that. Oh, I just had a short story picked up by Apex Magazine, and, or whatever. And so keep people up to date on what you're doing there. That can be helpful. Also, sometimes some people interview other authors or write reviews on other authors' books, that kind of thing.
Word of warning, though. I will say, if you're trying to develop your reader audience for your fiction, especially, or nonfiction, but not writing for writers, if you're not an expert trying to coach writers, don't write about your writing process. A lot of times it seems like the easy thing to do, because that's the actual activity that you're participating in, is your process. What are you doing? How are you editing? What are you doing? Right. But if you do that, you're going to attract writers to your website and not readers. So you want to make sure you're really trying to think about who your target audience is of your final published book, your final work, so that you're attracting those kinds of people to your website.
Right. And we also may answer this question. You may get a different view of this question as we go through the different personality types as well. So, yeah. because we do talk about it briefly and with some of the other personality types. If we haven't answered your question thoroughly enough.
I just got one question about screenwriting for movies, and I know that sometimes people take a book and turn it into a screenplay. But as for just doing a screenplay, that's a totally different ball game from writing regular books, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's an entirely different. We don't really talk about that because neither one of us do that, but I have taken about, I don't know, I took a lot of classes and workshops on screenplay writing, and it's an entirely different process. It's entirely different setup, and entirely different ways you market yourself. It's a whole nother thing. So if you are interested in that, I highly recommend Googling and looking into people who actually teach on screenplay writing, because we're really talking about people who want to write and publish books and or short stories or even magazine articles. That's kind of where we're focused, not on the screenplay writing.
I see, but at any time, some kind of producer might ask you if you want to make one of your books into a movie. You probably say yes, right?
Oh my gosh, that's what everybody wants. That's like the hitting the jackpot, like Andy Weir. Sure, we'd love that, right? So, okay.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to the next one. So we are at C, the calling card writer. And the calling card writer, their primary motive for writing a book is actually not the book itself, it's the business behind the book. So most of these kinds of writers are actually, their goal is to speak or teach or sell their services, their consulting services, and a book can really lend a lot of credibility to your career. So a lot of people get confused between the calling card writer and the entrepreneur because both are business minded and business focused. But again, the calling card writer's primary goal is not to be a writer. They already have a business that's their primary source of income, and their books support that business. So they're less concerned about whether or not the books themselves actually make money. In fact, some of them will literally give their books away as a calling card, which is why we call it the calling card writer. They'll have copies that they'll give to each of their clients or potential clients to try to generate new business. So a good example of this is are the doctors, like, who have maybe a best-selling book on diet and nutrition. They're making a lot of money on that book, most likely, but they don't stop seeing patients or touring or speaking or any of the other things that actually earn their income. Even the radically successful books, the ones that are like are bestsellers across all the different lists, those books are really just to establish them as an expert in the field and make them a national name. So for the calling card writer, we typically recommend, and it's a little bit iffy here, but we typically recommend the faster independent path to publication for most calling card writers. And that's because if you're using your book as a means to generate new business or to establish your expertise, you want to get that book out fast. And especially if you're in an industry where the latest advice changes frequently, you want to get that book out as quickly as possible, and you may have to revise it every year just to keep up with the changing trends in your industry. So now there are some people, if you're, again, a celebrity, or if you already have 100,000 people on your list and your industry is not as fast moving, that could potentially make you a good market for traditional publication. And especially because traditional publications, sometimes it can be easier to get a nonfiction deal than a fiction deal. So if you have that big practice, if you have celebrity connections or a really large mailing list or a unique take on a popular subject that's really hot right now, then getting that agent and traditional deal might be a good direction. But if not, if none of those things are true, then indie is going to be the way to go. So other considerations, really ultimately the decision whether publish traditionally or independently is going to rest on your goals for the book. If you need it sooner rather than later, then independent publishing is the only path that's going to get that book out in weeks or months instead of potentially years. It's also the only path that gives you control over that book and its publication date, as well as the cover and the marketing materials and all of that. But if you're less concerned with the speed to market and more concerned with the prestige, and you think you have that clout to attract a traditional deal, then go for it. So primarily evaluate your publishing goals and your current platform. Really think through what you're trying to accomplish. And then based on that, study your publishing options. That's going to give you the best platform and the best foundation for your ultimate, to achieve your ultimate goals. As far as the marketing side of things, if you already have a business, you probably already have a website. So just make sure you add a landing page for that book to your existing website. And then start a blog or newsletter on the topic of your book. That can often be a really good way to start attracting readers to your writing, to your book, and also establishing your expertise before that book ever launches. It's just really, it's what a lot of like cookbook authors and stuff like that do. Like they'll start posting their recipes, posting their journals and their pictures and all that stuff as they go, and then that actually turns into the book. And that's a very common method of this calling card style of writing. And then begin posting about your topic on, social media platforms that are related to your work, your particular topic, and your target audience. So if you're writing a book on business, then by all means, you want to have a platform, you want to have a presence on LinkedIn. If, you're targeting moms and parents, and then Pinterest might be a really good place to get started. So think through that as you consider your social media options.
So now we come to the D in our author personalities, and this is the dabbler or the undecided writer. And the dabbler has a lot of ideas. The problem is they can't figure out which one they really want to pursue or how to pursue that idea. And Megan and I love dabblers. We've both been dabblers. Many well-known and successful authors started as dabblers. The thing about it is dabblers are just sticking their toes in the writing waters. And if you want to save yourself a lot of time and energy, it's good to kind of understand the different options available for you. Because there are a lot of different kinds of writing careers, and each one comes with its own work and its own ups and downs and its own pros and cons. So when I first began writing, I was writing nonfiction because I had a magazine background, and that's what you do when you have a magazine background. Also, my first book was a calling card book. I was a personal trainer, and I wrote a book called The Wine and Chocolate Workout, and I wanted that for my clients, and that was the reason for that book. Later, I began writing for other magazines, and I wrote in all different topics, but it was always nonfiction. So eventually, I interviewed a couple of fiction authors, and I had this aha moment, and I began to understand that, oh, you could do fiction even though you're not Stephen King or James Patterson. Wow, there are people who write fiction and get it published, and I had a real desire to try that. So for most dabblers, it's difficult to recommend a particular publishing path because it really depends on which of their 50 projects we're talking about. A lot of, like I said, dabblers have a lot of different ideas and a lot of things going. So if they want short stories, then submit them to journals, to magazines that take short stories, or multi-author anthologies, and learn about that, like Duotrope, which we mentioned before. That's a great way to go. If you're writing nonfiction articles, obviously you're going to be looking for magazines that want those kinds of articles, and will, pay you for them. The problem for a dabbler is often that full-length books are really a big commitment. They take a lot longer to write and they're a lot harder to get published. So unless you're really committed to the process, it can be a tough thing. So particularly for a dabbler, you need to understand that when you're pitching a book, you will be rejected. If you're pitching a book for traditional publishing, you are going to be rejected a lot. And it is emotionally a difficult process for everybody. I mean, you pitch again and again, and then you get told again and again, no, 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 no. So if you're not quite ready for that, you might want to pick a different kind of thing to get going. But we also, Megan and I never suggest that anybody choose, well, just say, oh, well, I'm just going to independently publish my book. Because if you don't treat that as a professional undertaking, you're probably not going to be real happy with the results on that side either. So considerations, pick a project. If you're a dabbler, pick one thing. You're not committing to this thing for life. Just pick something and finish it. That's a dabbler's biggest problem, is finishing something. You learn so much by finishing. I learned so much about the process of writing and plotting or planning a story just by writing for magazines. And I also learned that I didn't want to keep doing it. It's hard. It's a lot of work, and it's hard to make a decent living doing it. And I didn't know I didn't want to do it until I actually did it. So sometimes you just have to commit to something and try it to learn. Another thing that we often recommend is blogging, because when you blog, especially if you put yourself on a schedule where you're blogging every week or every other week or whatever schedule that you want to put yourself on, it's a self-discipline, and you learn a lot by hitting that publish button, once a week or once a month or whatever your schedule is, and putting that product out there. It's just a good discipline and a good and you also, sometimes you learn about yourself. What did you really like to write? What worked? What did you get responses from readers? What didn't you? So blogs can be super helpful. So the Dabbler's Toolbox. We suggest you learn about all the different arms of the publishing industry if you're undecided, because sometimes you just don't know what you want to do. Like for me, I didn't know I wanted to dive into fiction until I interviewed a couple of fiction authors. So learn as much as you can. Another thing we suggest is checking out Duotrope, as we mentioned, because there you'll see a lot of different types of publishers who are asking for a lot of different types of writing and a lot of different types of work. What markets pay, what markets will just let you send things in for free. So you learn a lot there. We also recommend you attend writers' conferences and you join writers' groups, because there's nothing like talking to people to find out what they're doing, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. It's just a really excellent thing to do. And actually, I do think there is a workshop some point this weekend that is from, they're featuring OC writers, the Sisters in Crime, Romance Writers of America, and one more. Do you remember what it is, Megan?
No.
Oh, Southern California Writers Association. Oh. So it's those are 4 different excellent writing groups right here in Orange County, if this is where you live, that we have relationships with all of those groups, and they're great. So you can go listen in on that workshop and see some of those awesome ladies. Anyway, we also recommend you pick one project, see it through to the end. If you really do want to be a writer, create a website and start a blog. So that's our Dabbler's Toolbox.
All right, so I think we're going to do one more Q&A real quick before we go into the last personality type and our little closing bit. So any questions about the calling card writer or the dabbler?
Well, when you just say start a blog, well, what's supposed to be in the blog? Examples of your writing or any old thing or what?
Well, that's like what we were talking about before. It can be, you want to focus it on the type of reader you're trying to attract, but it could be your research. If you're writing, for example, a sci-fi like Andy Weir did, right? You want to talk about your research into how to grow potatoes on Mars, right? If you're writing historical romance, you could talk about, the different styles of Regency corsets, or I don't know, something. So you can talk about that. You could definitely post excerpts if you want to go indie, but I wouldn't recommend that for traditional. And if you want to do something totally different, just kind of think about what your audience will find interesting, and that's what you should blog about. Now, if you're a dabbler and you're just starting out and still trying to figure that out, just posting kind of whatever you're thinking about, or even doing sort of a journal style blog would be a way just to get in the habit of writing and staying consistent and creating a schedule around your writing. And that can be entirely useful too. So it's really very dependent on what your project is.
I had it just as a note here. I had a friend who, she was also a photographer. And so what she just started doing is taking, some of her favorite photographs, and she would use them as like story starters or thought provokers. And then she would write something about the photograph, something that the photograph made her think about, or something that appealed to her with the photograph. So those are kinds of different ideas. By the way, just going to mention really quick, because I've noticed a couple of people have signed off. We are going to be and I'm not saying, I know people have things to do and places to go and people to see, so I'm not offended at all. But I did want you to know at the end, we are going to be giving a coupon code. We have a, how many hours is it, Megan? 5 hour?
No, it's 3.5, I think.
3.5 hour course called Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career, that goes much, much more detail into this. Plus, it comes with a book, a PDF copy of our book by the same name, and worksheets that help walk you through things, and a lot of more of these questions answered a lot more thoroughly. But so I just want you to know that coupon code is coming up at the end of the presentation here. So anyway, moving along.
All right. So our last personality is the entrepreneur. And for the entrepreneur, the books are the business. So your primary goal as an entrepreneur is to have a lucrative financially successful career. And honestly, this is the kind of writer that most writing blogs and podcasts and websites are really aimed at. It's the kind of writer that Greta and I both are. I mean, like we said before, we're about 50-50 artist and entrepreneur, but we want to have and are working towards that lucrative, financially successful writing career, that full-time income. So as an entrepreneur, you must be self-motivated, flexible, experimental, have some leadership skills, and really be willing to put in the hours, because entrepreneurs are lifetime learners, and it can be a round-the-clock job if you let it. So for the entrepreneur, your choice of independent or traditional publication, whether that's agented or small press, is really going to have more to do with the particular project that you're releasing than what's going on in the wider industry, or that those opinions, that bias within the industry. A lot of business-minded authors actually do both independent and traditional, depending on that project and what their goals are for that project. So you'll find as you search the internet that there are a lot of really strong opinions about the right way to publish. And this is really where Greta and I differ from so many other people out there, because we don't believe there is a right way, but some people will say that independent publishing is ruining the industry with unprofessional products and cheap prices. And it's the drive to the bottom. They're giving everything away for free or 99 cents. And oh my gosh, it's the worst. There's no editing. These are terrible books. Nobody should be reading them. Those kinds of people think that you should try and try and try and try, no matter how long it takes, to hone your craft and write the novel that no agent or editor can resist. And they believe that the traditional model is the right and only way, the only legitimate way to have your book published. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are indie authors who believe that the traditional model is just taking advantage of authors, that it's outdated and outmoded, inflexible. And all they're really doing is giving authors ego strokes instead of an actual income. Advances are going down, and it's harder and harder to get an agent. And it's not worth it anymore. In a modern era, it makes more sense to let the readers be the gatekeepers and decide what is quality enough for a good story. So there's a huge spectrum here, and we're right in the middle. And we believe that you can go either way and be successful. It really depends on your goals and what you're looking for out of your book and your time. As a result, the entrepreneur really needs to be less concerned with those politics and more concerned with the production of great books. Whether that's traditionally going through the big houses or whether that's indie, you want to have a beautiful book that will sell. And that's your goal. To do that, you need to learn the industry. So within that there are several different methodologies towards earning that income. You can find that big publishing house and get the advance and try to make your money by getting your books into bookstores, keeping in mind that you're sharing all those royalties with your agents and the publishing house itself. Some people believe that you have to write a book a month and publish fast and furiously and just churn out material as quickly as possible in order to get more books out there so that you're earning more income overall. We've seen authors do both successfully. We've seen independently published authors release 3 to 4 books a year and do well. We've seen traditionally published authors with big publishing houses who don't do well at all. So there's no guarantees no matter what you choose in this industry. You really have to do what makes you happy and what makes sense for you and your style. The key is to really take the time to design that career that will work for you, to understand yourself and understand your writing speed, your skill sets, and what gets you excited. Because the one thing that I can promise you is that passion is the only thing that's going to get you through the ups and downs of this process, whether you're getting rejected by traditional publishers or then get a big advance on your book and pop a bottle of champagne, whether you are celebrating because you've published your first book only to have negative reviews, only to have then other positive reviews, and you're up and down and up and down. The only thing that's going to get you through all of that, because it's a rough industry, is that passion for the work and for your career and your goals and following those dreams. So within the Entrepreneur's Toolbox, we actually teach in our course, Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career, which we are giving the coupon code for. We teach that you should consider creating a career mission statement. Figure out what your goals really are and what your purpose is for writing. And then post that somewhere where you can reference it frequently so that you stay true to that initial desire. You definitely need to study craft and business. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to be equally skilled in both sides of the industry in order to do well. Attend conferences and join writers groups for the same reasons we've stated before. It helps you find your tribe. It helps you find those networking connections and helps you find the opportunities that you might not otherwise see. Learn about the publishing industry. And then, yes, you want to create that professional website that we've talked about. You want to start an email list to start gathering those readers and bringing them into your network, your ecosystem of your writing. And then choose 1 or 2 social media platforms that you enjoy being on and that also have the potential to have your particular target audience and your readers on it.
So as I mentioned before, we do have a course. And is this the course
So
slide?
this is
No,
this
no.
is just visit the website for more on the personalities.
Oh, okay. You talk about that then. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So
Hey, ladies, quick question. Maria posted, if you guys have an Instagram.
not
No.
I have a personal Instagram where I do post things for my fiction, but I'm not good at it. I'm not a photographer. So I do, but it's not very good.
We do have a Facebook group, which I know Facebook may be going the way of the dinosaur, but we're still dinosaurs on that. We have an author wheel Facebook group, and then yeah, I'm more on Facebook, and my publisher wants me to do Instagram, and technically I have an Instagram account, but I have never posted one thing there. So go to Megan's. It's better.
Just want to add that many people post exactly the same thing on Facebook and Instagram.
Yes, and I know, and I think Facebook has actually started taking my posts from my author page and putting them on Instagram for me, which is just ducky, because then I don't have to do it. So,
Yeah.
but I will be learning about that more. But
So if you are interested just to see what I do, and like I said, I'm not awesome at it, at Megan P. Haskell is my Instagram handle.
yes. So our website here, though, if you have questions that you think of later, you can email us at info@authorwheel.com. And also, if you haven't taken the author personality quiz because you came in late or whatever, it is there for free, and it's right on the homepage. It says take the quiz, and you can discover which of the 5 personalities you come out most strongly in.
And we actually recommend that you take the quiz a couple times, because you might find that if you if there's one question where you're iffy on which of 2 answers, for example, is most applicable, it might change your score enough that you would get a different one. So that's how we decided that we're 50-50 artists and entrepreneurs, because you just change a couple answers that are still true, but if you're kind of split, then that might make a difference, and you can just kind of see what you're at.
Right.
All right. And
I
then
the conferences that are happening this weekend, I got the Southern California Writers Association, but I think there were a couple more.
It's Romance Writers of America, Southern California Writers Association, Sisters in Crime, which is mostly, a mystery, thriller, suspense authors. I'm part of that group. Romance Writers of America is obviously, that's romance mostly. Southern California Writers Association is everybody. And OC Writers is primarily an online group where they post on Facebook every day and who's doing what. And that's also for anybody and everybody. So those are the 4 people they'll have a person from each group presenting in that workshop coming up.
Okay. And I also had a question about conferences. Sometimes I see a lot of advertisings for a lot of different conferences in a lot of different places, like in States and some in England. How do you know if some are reputable or some are just
Yeah.
what are some of the most known ones?
Yeah, I will say that for me personally, I went with the local option that I didn't have to go to a hotel for. That was how I found my first conference. But I think really part of it's going to come down to your budget, where, part of it's going to come down to, is it a place you want to visit? Because, there's one in Hawaii that I was like, maybe I'll go to that one because, Hawaii. But as far as knowing whether or not it's a reputable one, the best way is to start developing your network and seeing where other writer friends are going or attending, and also looking at the list of instructors, teachers, and agents or editors that are going to be at that conference. Because if it's a high profile conference, you'll get a lot of, high profile teachers, a lot of high profile agents, if your goal is traditional, that you can actually pitch. And so that would be important. So take a look at their list, their reviews, and like I said, that networking of who's going, who of your friends is going to different ones as well.
Another thing is that a lot of the the national writing organizations that are genre related. So like Mystery Writers of America, they do a conference every year. It's called BoucherCon. The Romance Writers of America, they do a conference, a national conference every year, and so on. So the big writing organizations, the big national writing organizations will have these more genre related conferences. So if you know what kind of writing and publishing you want to do, those can be good too, because you'll find it's easier to find your crowd, and you
but also keep in mind size too. Like the local one, the first one that I went to was the Southern California Writers Conference. And it's a fairly small conference, which meant that I got more one-on-one personal interaction with other writers, with the instructors and all of that, versus the big ones like BoucherCon, or if you go to the big, RWA conferences, they have potentially thousands of people at that conference. So you're not going to get that same level of interaction. So again, it depends on your goals, what you're looking for to get out of that conference.
Yeah. But I do think joining some local groups and talking to, it's really difficult right now with COVID, but I know Sisters in Crime is doing a monthly meeting on Zoom. I'm sure that when things open up again, you'll be able to go and meet people. But I just think that's super helpful, because you'll meet people who've been to all these conferences, and they'll have their opinions, and you can sift through those and all of that.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. So our course, I just want to talk about the course for 1 second, and we can take a couple of wrap up questions too. But the course is on Udemy. And just for you guys, just the attendees who've come, we have, it's the price of the course is usually $80, but you can get it for $12.99 if you put in the code author wheel when you go there. And what we're going to cover with that is, again, the pros and cons of each publishing path, but like we talked about today, but in much greater detail. And also then we will walk you through the steps to publication for each of these paths, because it's fine. I know today we just kind of skated over the top. It's fine to say, oh, I really want to try to get an agent in a big publishing house. Well, yeah, but there's a lot of steps to doing that. Like each one of the things that we're presenting, there's quite a bit of work involved. And so we teach you the steps, and then we also have action plans that you will develop on your own. We give you an action plan, you answer questions, and you develop your own goal sheets that will help to lead you down that path to publication. We also have sections about building your author platform in much more detail, like what kind of website, what should you have on your website? A lot of those questions you guys were asking, we do go into those in a lot more detail. And then we talk about writing the next book and getting inspiration to keep the whole thing going.
And I will point out too that we just released the second edition of our book by the same name. It's Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career. The book is available on Amazon in ebook form right now. I think we priced it at $4.99, if I remember correctly. I think that was $4.99. But if you join the course, you actually get the book PDF version of the book for free. So that is included as part of the course materials. And it's a lot of the same information, but of course, just presented in different ways, in whatever way you learn the best. And each of the modules in the course is only 10, I think the longest one is 20 minutes long. So between 10 and 20 minutes, each of the little modules. So it's an easy course to take. We've tried to break things up into manageable chunks so that you don't feel overwhelmed, because ultimately that's our goal, is really to help you cut through all that noise and all that extra information and focus on just the next steps and the taking one step forward at a time, and to get you closer to your ultimate goal.
Yes. What she said. So it looks like we have like about 5-6 minutes for a few more questions, whether it's about the course or the things we covered today or any of that. Do you we would be so happy to take more of your questions.
Okay. I'm still wondering whether I should try to write a book first or a screenplay. I guess I have more of a marketable idea for a screenplay than I do for a book.
There are some really good organizations out there that where you can take courses on writing a screenplay, because it's very rigid in terms of the way you present the material. And in fact, when I was taking a screenplay writing course, they suggest certain software that you buy that helps to organize the material exactly the way that they want it. So it's a very specific format that you have to apply to. So that's just not something I would try to jump into without a lot of education.
What was the name of that software that they use?
I just don't remember. I'm so sorry because I don't do it. But what I'm saying is, like, if you just start, Googling classes on screenplay writing and that kind of thing, you'll probably find some, and I'm sure you'll find some, and they'll tell you that kind of stuff too. So I would definitely look into that.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Sir, any other questions about book writing or anything?
Well, Greta, I met you before. I'm a friend of Stephen Homestead and his whole family.
Yes, I remember you.
Okay, so we sort of had this chat about the fact that I have a terrible history of being an abuse survivor, and it's hard to write a book about that. I'm not sure if anybody wants to read it. And then you said, well, maybe I could start by blogging about it and seeing if anybody's interested in that. Obviously, there are other people like me who need to share about those things. And I guess because it feels like I would need to get anybody to understand it, it would have to be a book. But I'm still not sure that anybody other than other abuse survivors wants to read it.
Well, that's true, but I mean that it maybe puts you firmly in the calling card writer category, that if you did tackle a book on that, but then maybe used it for speaking and giving away to people who've had similar experience, that could be a good option.
Yeah, and I'm also really interested in art therapy. I've been doing art therapy with a therapist for many years, and there's some courses I can take so I could be certified to offer sort of a non-official version of art therapy, and I plan to do that. So maybe my book could be combined with that, and others have suggested using my own art therapy work to sort of illustrate the book.
Yeah, that's a very cool idea, and you could even put some of your art therapy work on your blog.
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
So that's a very cool idea.
Okay, so I'm thinking a website /blog. They have those, right? It's not always just a blog or just a website.
Right. Most websites these days come with a blog function.
Okay.
So it looks like
he's signing us out.
Gilbert is signing us out. So,
okay.
But feel free to email us and
thank you so much for today. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, good. I hope so. Yeah. Megan, did you have anything else you want to say for just wrapping up?
No, I think just, thank you everybody for joining us today. I do hope you found this helpful and that, it helped clarify your goals and your purpose for writing. That's our goal was to help you clarify your goals. So I hope you will consider looking into our course, but even if not, if you have any questions, please email us info@authorwheel.com and check out our website at authorwheel.com because there's a lot more information on there. We actually do have a blog on there. Currently, we are blogging our own processes for we're both starting new books this year, so we're working through that process on our blog and giving advice. This month it's all about story structure, so we're going through the 3-act story structure and explaining each of the tentpole moments that we use to help outline our books and make sure that the storytelling is on track. So check out our website, check out our blog. There's lots of information. Email us, and we hope to see you on our course.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming.